So when you're looking to hire a professional, you got to understand the training that they go through and the way that they are going to likely be viewing the world, because it's going to drive the conversations. And depending on what you need, that may or may not be the right fit.
I think that's like a lot of the confusion, when people are looking for professionals, is that it's hard to differentiate, right? It's only really off by one letter. They look pretty similar. Yeah. I can't tell you how many people will be like, oh yeah, Cliff Cornell is CFA. No, I'm not. I'm CFP.
You don't want to hire a brain surgeon to look at you when you have the sniffles or, help you through strep throat, right? Like you got to get the right professional for the right thing. And I think that's what professional designations can help somebody start to identify is like, okay, what are they capable of, right? And then is the thing that they're focusing on in their practice, is that what's right for me too?
Information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up-to-date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussions and answers to questions do not involve the rendering of personalized investment advice, but are limited to the dissemination of general information. A professional advisor should be consulted before implementing any of the options presented. Encompass More Asset Management LLC is a registered investment advisor with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and only transacts business in states where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Tall Oaks Podcast. I'm your host, Branden Ducharme, joined today by a friend of mine, Cliff Cornell, from joining us out from New York. Cliff is a CFP and does some really interesting work and writes a podcast. He's been on a podcast before, but if no one remembers this, writes a blog called Yield to Maturity. That is an interesting read and quick-witted. So, Cliff, thanks for hopping on.
Yo, thanks for having me on, Branden. I love having conversations with you. I feel like we always uncover something, and it's usually pretty productive.
Yeah. So, for those that don't know, Cliff and I met through X, just being in kind of the same space on X in the financial industry, and collaborating or talking ideas and theories, or talking about the industry and stuff. And one of the conversations we recently had was this conversation around professional designations and the public's perception of them, and do they add value or not? And, if you're looking to hire somebody, what professional designation is it that people should be looking for or thinking about, or, what are the pros or cons of that? And it all started because I had made a comment on X and said, CFPs are quickly becoming the realtors of the financial industry. And a lot of people took that obviously quite offensively, which I can appreciate why. But my point on that comment, Cliff, was that, realtors, I think people wouldn't agree with me that it's not exactly a hard thing to become a realtor, right? It's not incredibly difficult and very common. And the reason why, and I say all this like as before somebody gets too up in arms, I say all this as a guy that technically is a realtor, and I lived in that space for a while, and I'm about to sit for the CFP this summer, right? Finishing up a master's program that qualifies me to do that. And so what I observed though with the National Association of Realtors, which is who is the board that gives out that realtor designation, Cliff, is they want as many realtors as possible because everyone pays dues, and then they just go, lobby to kind of put up their moat around it. And then you have to be a realtor in order to really participate in the residential real estate market, right? So they kind of have this moat where if you want to be, have access to the MLSs and the systems and the processes and the other realtors and be able to have this cooperation across brokerages, like you have to pay the NAR dues, right? And my observation was that the CFP, there's becoming more and more CFPs, and the behavior of the CFP board, in my opinion, is potentially questionable, where they just want people to pay dues, and they're certainly creating a lot of money and revenue for themselves. And there's potential like just self-interest that serves at these professional designation levels, right? And what that does, and that, and here's the thing is, I don't think that's really unique to the CFP board. I think that's pretty much every organization.
I was going to say that. I was like, a lot of these professional organizations do work like that. I don't think that it's, I wouldn't say that it's specific to the CFP, although obviously that is what we're talking about today. I'm sure that there's, people that would agree that it's very similar across a lot of financial designations that people obtain.
Yeah. So it sparked a lot of conversation. So that was kind of my point or observation. Not to say that CFPs are worthless or it's not a worthwhile designation. My point is really like, it is becoming the designation of table stakes, right? In the sense that like you got to have in this industry, like a CFP isn't the end all be all. It's the beginning of the journey, right? It's sort of that more minimal requirement, or it's at least becoming that way in the industry, right? Like, now it doesn't have to be a CFP. A lot of people go with other professional designations for various reasons, and I think that's part of the conversation I want to have today too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that for a lot of people, they look to differentiate themselves. And, I'm a younger person. I passed my CFP 3 years ago when I was 24. For me, that was like the first thing that really allowed me to build any sort of confidence in the industry, right? Like you want to work in financial planning, wealth management, anything along those lines, being a 24-year-old doesn't really help you in a lot of cases, right? Mm-hmm. But for me personally, I knew that was going to accelerate some exposure, a lot of exposure to topics that I otherwise would be learning in my day-to-day, which could take a really long time to really kind of get my arms around all the different topics that the CFP exam does cover. But as you said, it's becoming more and more that the CFP really is table stakes, right? Like if you don't have it in the industry, people, people are familiar with it. And I think that even as professionals or aspiring CFP professionals, people do realize that they want to have this designation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I very clearly don't think it's the end all be all, right? But I think for people that don't have the experience, it's a good idea to consider doing some kind of professional designation. And it doesn't have to be the CFP, right? So I don't think like CFP is like, I don't think CFP is the table stakes, but I think having some kind of professional designation that shows your commitment to the industry, yep, right, is table stakes, right? And having it be a worthwhile designation, not the, get it over the weekend at the Holiday Inn, type of designation.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, I'm trying to think like how to articulate this. The reality is, well, let me backtrack and let me say this. I don't have a CFP right now, right? I have an AWMA or Accredited Wealth Management Advisor designation. That was certainly that's a less rigorous designation to get. But I got that initially while I was actually still in my undergrad. And then I went and did a chartered market technician program. So I'm a CMT charter holder, and that is, I would argue, a more rigorous, having been through the CFP curriculum at this point, I would say it's a more rigorous and difficult program. But I suppose it also depends on who you are, right? Because sometimes, stuff's difficult for different people for different reasons. But yep, it's a very rigorous program, not very commonly known outside of hedge funds and investment banks, maybe, but a very rigorous program nonetheless. But it's opened my eyes that like different designations are for different things and will provide a different kind of client experience, right?
Yep.
And so why don't you talk really quick about what are the things that like what do we cover in a CFP, right? When you're hiring a CFP, like what is it that you're trying to get out of that individual? What are they going to be trained to do and accomplish?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the CFP exam is, borderline the groundwork for a personal CFO, right? Like this is something that is going to bring somebody through all major aspects of their personal financials. Like for us specifically, we focus on cash flow and budgeting, right? Money in versus money out, liquidity management. So that would be more of our short-term goals, right? On top of maybe, do we need a cash reserve? What does work look like? It's always variable.
Yeah.
Retirement planning and projections, investments, where we're investing, everything that's encapsulated in obviously investments. That's a pretty big section. Tax planning, estate planning, insurance planning, where we're getting a real holistic view. And it's not, to I mean, I think one thing that people misunderstand about CFPs, and Branden, correct me if I'm wrong or if you've seen differently, but I think that people think that the CFP is focusing so heavily on portfolio management, investments, and like that's of course a piece of it, but like you're in it right now. And investment planning is 17% of the CFP exam. That's not very significant relative to, it's pretty even spread across all the areas that I just mentioned. And I think
I'll interrupt. Let me interrupt you right there really quick too and add more context to that because I think it's a really interesting point. 17% of the exam, but the depth of content on that 17%, what I can confirm, like having gone through that course, is I think we covered less in the graduate level portfolio management and investment analytics. I feel like we covered less than I covered in my undergrad on finance in finance. It is very like introductory, the absolute basics of how investment portfolios work. I mean, just the absolute basics. And so for me, like that was the most interesting takeaway of the entire thing, which is, hey, a CFP, they're good at financial planning, but you don't go hire a CFP to go beat the market for you, right? Like you hire a CFP, and I think that was a good analogy. Like it's that CFO track, right? Like, it's a specialized, there's specialized sub skill sets, right? And a CFP or certified financial planner, they do a good job at having the 30,000 foot view, and they have that exposure to, hey, how does the estate plan come together, and how does the insurance plan complement the estate plan, and how is our cash flow moving in the right direction, right? Is there a deficiency here that's going to cause an issue a couple years down the road, right? You can do some of that forecasting and clash detection, a couple years down the road. But I think if we take, and I think you would agree with me on this, if we take the average CFP and you start talking about derivatives portfolios and, really getting the weeds on different investment theories, they're like, that's not where their interest usually even is. A lot of them don't even care to talk about that stuff.
There's some that basically are outsourcing investments entirely at this point. I know that's slowly starting to happen for certain RIAs where they don't really want that, and you're correct in that. Like I know, personally as a CFP, I know my value is not really being driven by portfolio management. Mm-hmm. My value is, just like you said, tying all these aspects together: portfolio management, tax awareness, estate planning, insurance, and cash flows, and being able to view that in a holistic manner, right? Like not just and of course we go out and, you and I are trying to bring things to the next level. You're much more markets focused, having the CMT and stuff. And that's something that's always interested me. I'm pursuing my MBA right now as well. I know you're doing your master's. And I think that like pushing back on what you said initially before we even started this conversation, the CFP is like it's like price of admission, like that's the beginning of your journey as a financial advisor, financial planner. I think it's great in that aspect, but like there's so many different avenues that you can take it. I mean, think about the people that we know, right? There's people that specialize in one singular niche of financial planning, whether that be high-level estate plans as a certified financial planner, or, specific like non-publicly traded company liquidity events. And that's what they focus on. And that's it. So I think that's what's really cool. And what's always interested me about the profession is how granular you can get. And I think and we're going to get into this down the line during this conversation, is like, who are you looking to work for? Because there's so many different avenues to finding a professional that can work for you. Yeah,
that's the point I was going to make earlier, and the thought just escaped me. But one of the things I've noticed over the years, when people would come in and interview with me, and we were looking at working together, is I would get the question like, "Hey, are you a CFP?" And for a long time, I was kind of like almost a little bit defensive about it. And what I learned was they really weren't asking if I was a CFP, because I started answering and saying, "Are you trying to ask if I'm a fiduciary?" Right? And they would say, "Yeah, I'm wondering if you're a fiduciary." That's what's, and I could answer the question and just say, "Yes, look, I'm registered with the SEC. as a legal, and I have a legal obligation to work in your best interest, right? And that like that's what people were looking for. They weren't really looking for necessarily like, hey, did you pass this, this test, right? Like they want to work with a quality professional, but they want to, like, the thing that was most important is that they're working with somebody in their best interest, right? And so I think that's where CFP has done a nice job helping the public understand that somebody with a CFP has voluntarily taken on a code of ethics of a fiduciary obligation. But when you go to hire them, it's like, what are you really wanting out of that professional? Because a CFP is going to come to the table and say like, okay, I've had a broad exposure to a number of topics and concepts, and I kind of know what's out there. But broad exposure isn't always what you need to hire, right? And so I think like you were alluding to, are you friends with Mark Ciccini? Yeah. So Mark's a great dude. And I'm going to have him we've been talking about him coming on the podcast. And yeah, like you were saying, he specializes like in only really like equity compensation, particularly for companies that aren't public yet. Right. Yep. So like he's got a lot of clients that work at like SpaceX, I think. Right. And he's helping them through like all those tender offer opportunities and vesting periods and all this stuff. It's like super, super niche down. Right. But then there's CFPs like at our shop, we're pretty broad. We do a lot of work with like Main Street, type stuff. And so, the difference is like the people that hire us that are generally off of Main Street in our firm, like they wouldn't, find the cost of what it costs to work with Mark on that, because he's so niche in that one topic that's so important. His cost there's a lot of cost involved, right? He's absolutely, he can command that kind of, fee for himself for a reason. But my point is like, you don't want to hire a brain surgeon to like, look at you when you have the sniffles or, help you through strep throat, right? Like you got to get the right professional for the right thing. And I think that's what professional designations can help somebody start to identify is like, okay, what are they capable of, right? And then is the thing that they're focusing on in their practice, is that what's right for me too? Like the next layer down, right? Like I don't want an ENT operating on my foot. You got to go get a podiatrist, it's like, you got to get the right person still. What are the other professional designations that you commonly see when you're out in the industry, Cliff?
All the time. You'll see CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst, correct?
Yeah. Let's talk about that really quick. Like what is a CFA?
Yeah, so CFAs are interesting, and I know that it's much more common to see portfolio managers hold these. It's much more common at a hedge fund, much more common at institutions. Mm-hmm. And I do know a few people on Twitter that are CFA and CFP. Mm-hmm. And most of the time when they're saying if you're looking for somebody to be a financial planner, the CFA is not necessarily what you're looking for. Yeah. A lot of larger RIAs will have in-house CFAs that assist on portfolio construction and things like that, because I know that, like you were saying before, the depth of the investment section on the CFP, it's not really there, especially relative to a CFA, right? Like that's a 3-exam, wildly hard. I have a couple pals that are sitting for level 2 pretty soon.
Yeah,
I believe even level 1 is like a 42% pass rate, and it only goes down from there, right?
Yeah,
like that's a pretty tough exam. And I think, I don't know about you, Branden, but I feel like the CFA and the CFP can work in tandem, but they're two very different designations.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, right? So if you get somebody that is a CFA, they're going to likely have less exposure to a lot of the broad planning concepts, right? Like they're going to have less exposure to maybe some of the estate planning nuances or tax, potentially like less exposure to maybe tax planning. Definitely less exposure to insurance planning, right? Like that is probably not going to be the most exciting thing for a CFA, but they're going to bring more portfolio help to the table, right? In a meaningful way, especially if you have the chance to work with a CFA in a retail, what's called a retail client setting, right? So if you're the person saving for retirement and your advisor is a CFA, that's quite a bit of skill set to have in that relationship, right? But for somebody that's getting started and doesn't have a lot of assets yet, maybe like that might be a CFA might be overkill, right? Like you might not need to have that skill set in your life yet. And, but some of the smartest people I know are CFAs, and, it is a very respectable designation, but it's a totally different focus than a CFP.
Totally different. And I think that's like a lot of the confusion,
Yeah.
when people are looking for professionals, is that it's hard to differentiate, right? It's only really off by one letter. They look pretty similar.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people will be like, oh yeah, Cliff Cornell is CFA. No, I'm not. I'm CFP. Like that type of stuff. But it's really interesting to see how these different designations like intertwine and can complement each other, because you and I both know there's any aspect of financial planning that you can niche down so granularly that it's nuts, right? So you're always going to want additional help, and people that you can outsource to, or people that specialize, right? That's a very common thing in any financial planning engagement, is that people specialize in certain things, right? Like if you're working with a CFP for the first time, it's not uncommon for them to refer you to a CPA, refer you to an estate planner, right? So it's like all these different things serve to complement each other to ultimately, find the best possible avenues for a client.
Yeah. Yeah. That is what it's all about, right? And I think a good, well-rounded professional or a good, well-rounded firm has the ability to bring all the right relationships to the table to support the client in the needs of the demographic that they serve as a firm, right? Hey, it's no secret to us. We look at the demographics of this show. We know that a lot of you listening are actually other financial professionals and other investment advisors. We want to go ahead and invite you, if you're looking to do something different in your career, go ahead and reach out. We're always looking to bring on high quality people that understand how to do the planning process, align with our values, and are looking to deliver high value to their clients. Please just go ahead and reach out to us. You can get us on our website, ducharmewealth.com, and we look forward to talking to you. The CFA is also super valuable designation, but somebody that will start to probably bring a bit more, portfolio insight type ideas to a relationship, right? What other, CPA? I mean, what about? I mean, like we come across CPAs a lot. Are CPAs worth working with? Do people need a CPA? Is that?
It's a great question. I'm personally, I know that there's like sometimes some discourse on Twitter between planners and CPAs. I love CPAs. I think that a good CPA can be worth their weight in gold, especially when they're willing to collaborate with the financial advisors.
Yeah.
I think that that's another tool in the arsenal, like you were talking about, right? You're not going to go to a brain surgeon for a broken arm. But I think that, there's a level of collaboration. I'm sure you see this all the time in your planning clients, right? Where if you bring a team together, you can almost form this mini family office that the ultra wealthy leverage, right? Of course, they can afford it themselves. They do everything in house.
Yeah.
But if you have a good team around you, and that's your CFP or your financial advisor, financial planner, working hand in hand with your CPA, working hand in hand with the estate planning attorney, and all three of those aspects are kind of tied down, it just creates such an awesome engagement for somebody, right? Like every I is dotted, every T is crossed, things look good, and there's collaboration amongst professionals. And I think that's I would say this too, Branden. I think that a lot of people underestimate our willingness to collaborate with other professionals if they're not associated with our firm. Personally, I love CC me on the email with the CPA. You want me to jump on the Zoom with the CPA? I'm there. Estate planning attorney? I'm there. I love that stuff because it allows us as the planners to learn so much more, right? When we're working hand in hand with another professional that's speaking our language.
Yeah. Yeah. It is always nice. But I think the thing that I was really trying to, which you did a nice job highlighting, is like, your CPAs oftentimes they're not a financial planner. They can be, right? And there's a designation for that. It's actually very similar to the CFP. And it's a PFS, or personal financial specialist. And that's a designation awarded to somebody that is already a CPA by the CPA board. So that's what my dad is. So my dad's a CPA PFS, right? And so, but there's a natural instinct where people say I got, my CPA is my money guy or whatever. Right. And the reality is hey, my dad hasn't been willing to file taxes for somebody for, probably 15 years, probably more longer than that. Right. like he still has, clients work with another CPA or qualified tax professional, right? And there's a whole conversation on the tax side of the world to get into which professional designations and allow you to do what. But the point being is like, there's designations that creep their way into our industry where people are leveraging or still misconfused about like, is that who I need to hire? Do I need to hire a financial planner here, or do I need to hire a CPA here? And it really comes down to, are you needing tax compliance or are you needing tax planning, right? And sometimes if you're really needing planning, I will actually typically maintain the stance that like, you really can't do good tax planning without then also getting the CPA involved, because you need to understand the compliance aspect of the planning you're trying to accomplish, right? And so like, CFPs or financial planners in general that don't go and engage with the client's accountant are generally, in my opinion, doing the client a disservice, because they don't really understand or know for sure how that is going to flow through or affect your taxes, or whether, I mean, people forget this in the tax world, there's interpretation of code and law. And so CPAs, they're signing off on, yes, I'm willing to represent you to that, on that stance and this thing, I'm willing to go to bat for you with the IRS, right? And so they have to be comfortable signing off on something to file a tax return a certain way. And so different accountants feel different way about different things. And you got to make sure that what you're talking with the client about, the accountant also feels comfortable with that tax position, right?
Yeah, just like there's aggressive portfolios, there's also aggressive approaches to tax code.
Sure.
And I think that essentially to what you're saying, that the collaboration between professionals is almost necessary, right?
Yeah.
Like if you want a sound engagement, that's what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So CFA, CPA, have you come across CLU or a chartered life underwriter?
I've seen a few of them. I honestly don't. I don't know any of them personally. So let me know some more about this CLU designation.
Yeah, it's not a super easy designation to get. I don't think it's as rigorous as a CFP or a CFA or some of these other designations. But a CLU is a chartered life underwriter. I typically commonly see them at the insurance houses, right? So very common for somebody at like a Mass Mutual or Northwestern Mutual, or these firms that are really heavy on and focused on selling insurance products. And that's what I can't remember if it's certified life underwriter or chartered life underwriter.
I think it's charter.
I think it's chartered life underwriter. It's CLTU. Anyways, that's a designation that you're kind of holding yourself out to the public and saying like, my specialty or my niche is life insurance and annuities, right? And they, all of their planning aspects and conversations are going to probably be tying back to, selling somebody life insurance or annuities. And the reason why is because like, that's the lens through which they view the world. And they've been trained, right, is to look at this risk, management first focused idea. And so it's pretty common. So I just tell people like, look, there's nothing wrong with that designation. I have friends that are very respectable planners and professionals that I would absolutely have all the faith in the world in them and referring people to them. But realize, right, like when you go to hire a CFP or a financial planner in general, right, like we've identified like you get a certain type of skill set or exposure and they think a certain way, right? A CFA is going to think a certain way about investments because of the nature of the program they go through, right? Very, very fundamentals focused. If you go hire a charter life underwriter, they're going to be really interested in the conversation around insurance. It's how they view the world, right? If you hire a CPA that has become a financial planner, the conversations are probably oftentimes around tax, a lot of tax efficiency, right? Like you get these derivative offsets. So like, I think, did you tell me once your brother's a CMT as well?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So like I'm a CMT, right? So chartered market technician, it's a series of 3 exams. It's roughly 1,000-hour program. Not a super high pass rate. It's been around since the 70s. I think my serial number is like 3384. So there hasn't been an outrageous number of CMTs in history. And the biggest employers of CMTs are hedge funds and investment banks, basically. And then after that, quant shops like Ned Davis. So outside of the institutional space, it's very uncommonly known, but here's the reality is I'm a CMT. So somebody that thinks that they should, pick the best stocks and buy and hold the best deep value stocks for the next 20 years would not want to hire me. Right. Like that is not the experience a CMT is going to probably give you, a CMT is all about managing market timing and capital markets across different timeframes, different types of markets, very dynamic in the approach and very active. Right. And so the way that I manage portfolios and view markets is a lot different than the way that maybe a lot of other people would do it. Right. And that's where, again, if you're looking for a certain experience, you wouldn't want to hire me if you think the answer to your life is, just buy S&P 500 index fund and nothing else. And that's your financial plan or that's your investment plan. You're not going to want to hire me. Right. It's just not the way that I think. And I candidly probably don't want to hire a CFP either, because CFPs are going to be very much trained to think about diversification more than that. But my point is, right, you got to understand what you're biting off, right? However, if you are wanting that deep value stock portfolio, a CFA is probably the guy you're going to want to go to because of the fundamental training that they kind of get and focus on, right? I have exposure to that fundamental background from my undergrad, and I just found it to be not as exciting or compelling. But that's my own opinion, right? That's my own opinion. And again, what I found is the CMT works for me and the clients and the demographics that we tend to serve in my firm, because they have a certain need in their life from a risk management and a risk return profile. And it helps, I think it helps accomplish that goal. And so it aligns better with that type of investment need, in my opinion. Right. So that's CMT. What else do we have? MBA. MBA. You're working on an MBA right now. Is an MBA does somebody need an MBA to be a financial advisor? Is it helpful? Is it, what kind of person would be looking for an MBA as an advisor?
I know that we had a pretty long discussion. I think our last pod, didn't we cover MBA and the differences between academia and real life?
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
that's what we did.
Our gripes with academia.
Look, the MBA is I don't think it's hurting anybody. I think it's a nice way. I think a lot of, our businesses, relationships, I think it's a great way to meet people. I am learning some things. I am doing some cool classes. I'm doing an M&A class, which is kind of nice. Things that I otherwise wouldn't really be focused on. I don't know when the last time you ran a DCF was, but you can let me know.
I had to run one recently, but it was surprise for class.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, Branden, I will tell you, and I think you know this. I'm currently sitting for the American College of Financial Planning, and Jeff Levine and Michael Kitzes came out with another designation called Tax Planning Certified Professional. Yeah. And to me, this is an extension of the CFP.
Okay.
Right. Because I think that one way to not to slight the CFP and the designation or the exam or anything, because I know that it's tough, but it's an inch deep and a mile wide in a lot of cases, right? You cover a lot of content, but the granularity of that content is obviously that's where you get to decide where do you want to take it. For me personally, in what I see in working with clients, I saw that this designation came out. I had been considering the EA, which we put on ice for now, but I saw this come out, and I said, this is the extension of the CFP for me. This is how I want to niche down. I want to understand different aspects of tax and tax planning as they specifically relate to financial planning. So it's literally just an extension of the CFP exam for me. I have been having an absolute blast with it. I think that it's super fun. It answers a lot of the questions that I think a lot of advisors have themselves, and they don't really want to ask anybody. And it's answering those questions to me. I think that, I've never known more about HSAs in my entire life. So it's very cool. It's very, very granular, incredibly niche. A lot of these topics. And here's another thing, to what we were talking before about the CFP. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So like, no, I did not know that a shark fin clat was a thing. I didn't know that was, I had never heard the term before. Will that ever really be applicable to me? I don't know.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I mean, I nerd out on this stuff.
You,
I love it.
yeah. You're talking about a charitable reindeer trust, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure I'm following. No, I think that's like super cool. And candidly, like, I think where you're at in New York, like the estate taxes has become such a big component that it becomes more important. Right. And so I think there's more value add, but the whole point of this conversation is like, hey, if you are, ultra wealthy and have a super good team of tax professionals around you and really good estate attorneys, and what you need to hire is a really good portfolio manager, like you probably don't want a CFP. Like you don't want to go hire a CFP for that. That's not going to be the skill set, right? But if you need somebody that is in New York, that's very familiar with tax planning in New York and how to coordinate between what the CPA team is doing and the estate team is doing and what the portfolio manager now is doing or needs to do, right? Then you can get a CFP to coordinate between all three of those people, right? Yep. And that I think is like a unique advantage, right? Like where you're at, like municipal bonds in New York municipal bonds for New York residents is like a really interesting topic, right? And you could probably, as a portfolio manager, you could probably make a whole living just on specializing in that, truthfully.
Literally, yes, yeah.
But like in Utah here, like it almost never makes sense to do municipal bonds for people. Not always, but like it's very, very uncommon that what we really need in a client scenario is municipal bonds, right? And the thing that changes that is like income level, asset level, and geographical location, And so all of a sudden just being in a geographical location means you need a different experience from the professionals that you work with. And that's where like having that additional designation beyond just a CFP says, hey, like where I'm geographically at, there's an additional real need in this area because it's become such a big, impactful, important part of the end client experience. And so you got to do that work to show and demonstrate that like, again, it's, I guess the way that I view designations a lot of time is not actually like that, hey, Cliff went through this designation, so now he knows everything about, every little single thing about tax planning. Like he's the man now, right? Like, no, you're still not perfect. But what you're doing is you're saying like, hey, when you come work with me, I view the world, the lens through which I view the world is tax planning, right? Like I've got a broad exposure and I'm dialing in on tax planning. That is going to be a main point of the conversation that we have, right? It's like the signals you're sending to the market. And so when you're looking to hire a professional, you got to understand the training that they go through and the way that they are going to likely be viewing the world, because it's going to drive the conversations. And depending on what you need, that may or may not be the right fit. And there's really not a professional designation that holds somebody out as like, oh, you're the best because you have this designation. It's a signal, not really a qualification.
I couldn't agree with that more. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head in saying that, your geographic location can impact, like for me, we work with a lot of people, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, right? Like not the most tax-friendly environments. And so for me, when I began doing this tax course, right, it totally changed the way that I viewed financial planning previously. Like I view things with this lens of tax efficiency. Are we using everything possible? Because a lot of people are, that's a massive expense for them. And that's what they're worried about. And they want to understand how they eliminate tax drag in a portfolio, right? Okay, I can walk through that. Are we using asset location properly? All of those types of things. And like to your point, it's completely skewed my vision as to how I'd like to approach a planning client, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the best way to sum up professional designations is like it's a signal for the focus you're going to have, but it's not a qualifier of the actual quality of the work. And I think the reason I want to highlight that is because, like in summary of this conversation, I really want to be super clear that I don't have anything against professional designation or for a certain particular designation, right? I don't think anything is particularly better or worse than other designations per se. And candidly, like we both know some incredible people in this industry that are absolute just high quality, people in very serious and high professional, roles that have had meaningful careers and done very cool things and are incredibly intelligent and great at what they do in a lot of ways. No designations, no professional designations, like they're just, you know what I mean? They've gone out, they've got the experience, they've done the studying on their own. They had good mentors, whatever. And you can do that in this industry. I do encourage, obviously other advisors that are coming into the industry that reach out and talk to me. I say like, it helps you get established in the industry to go get some of this stuff, but it doesn't make you who you are. It signals to the market the kind of work you want to do and focus on.
I think like at the front end of this episode, the way that you described it, like it's really, it can lead you on the right path and allow you to figure out where you want to find yourself in the industry, what things you want to focus on. But it doesn't stop after you get the marks. Yeah. That's for sure. There's no way, like if you think that I'm ever going to take my foot off the gas from learning new stuff, it's you become a student of the sport, right? Yeah, like it's constantly learning. Branden, I'm sure you learn new things all the time and you're seeking out, additional knowledge, or you're researching it on behalf of your clients.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop. It doesn't all go away after you get the letters. It's like, okay, awesome, a CFP. That's great. I built a little bit of credibility here, I guess, to some extent. So I committed to, going through the coursework and all that stuff. But I think also, Branden, I'd like to point out, for a lot of clients, like I like to believe that most professionals or the good professionals will be able to identify whether a client is a good fit or not for them. Mm-hmm. So in the event, like somebody came to me and they were like, look, I'm looking for active management. I'm looking for just something more along the lines of what you focus on as a CMT. I would know right away, that's not not my cup of tea. That's not where I specialize. I know people that do specialize there. But I think it's also like a little bit of responsibility resides in the client to fully understand what they're looking for. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fair. And I think, that's part of why I try to do this podcast, is to get people thinking about all the things that they need to be thinking about. And ultimately it should help them drive towards finding the right professionals, right? Which isn't always going to be, me or my firm. I think at this point, we probably refer out more than half of the people that come looking to work with us, right? It's just the nature of it, right? Like not everyone's a good fit, but it's because everyone has their own unique circumstances and different styles or different capacities or whatever look different and serve different people differently, right? And that's not a bad thing. That's what makes a marketplace, right? Like,
I'd argue that a lot of the best advisors know when something might be a little bit out of reach for them, and are willing, like you just mentioned, to hire that away, or they know somebody in the industry that could be a great fit for that person. Because we all know that there's different aspects of focus, right? Mm-hmm. And we all know different people that focus on different things. There's people that focus solely on physicians or solely on dentists. And we may know somebody like that. And I think the best advisors and the ones that give back to the planning community or the advisor community are people that know when to say, hey, I'm not the guy for this, but I know exactly who is.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I'm with you on that one. So, well, I think we probably beat the dead horse on designations today, Cliff.
Yeah, that's all we got. That's it.
Yeah, like I'm good to wrap it up here before I start getting out of pocket. But I appreciate you hopping on. Like it's always fun to banter a little bit and go back and forth with someone that is in the industry. I think people that follow both you and I would probably agree. Like we don't agree on every topic at all, but we're friends as professionals and collaborate on a lot of ideas, and we do share a lot of common thoughts. And so it's fun to collaborate and make sure that we're not in our own bubbles a little too much sometimes. And so I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Branden. I love the banter. I love to go back and forth, and I love that you're willing to challenge beliefs, because I think a lot of people won't do that, and you usually do it pretty respectfully, which is good, right? Like that's what makes people better for what they do, because you're looking out, you're willing to challenge, a thought or something like that. And that's where you get, and of course we're going to disagree on things. We agreed on everything. There would be no way to differentiate between you and me, it would just make no sense. I think that professional disagreement's super important. And I think we do a good job of it.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, I what just came to mind, and this is more of, I think, somewhat of a life principle, but I'll share it. I think it's valid to this conversation. Is we have somebody new at our firm that started, and yesterday I was telling them, hey, I want you, as the new person, I want you to challenge everything that you're being told and thought. Right? If you have a question or you don't think something's right or whatever, like write it down. Systems, processes, like whatever, and it's okay to come and say, why do we do this? Why do we do this way? Right? Like that, you're a fresh set of eyes on everything that we can really utilize and benefit from that now. And so I shared this story. There's a story that was shared, and I picked this up from Hiram Smith from the Franklin Covey Institute. And there's a story where a guy's watching his wife make ham, and she always cuts the ends off the ham. And he, finally he's like, we're just wasting this ham. And he's like, why do we do that? And she's like, well, it makes the ham taste better. And he goes like, who taught you that? He says, my mom. So he goes to his mother-in-law and he goes, you cut your ends off the ham? And she says, yes, I cut the ends off the ham. He's okay, why do you do that? She says, well, it makes the ham taste better. And so she goes, okay, where did you learn that? Who told you that? And she said, well, my mom. So he goes to his wife's grandma. And he says, do you cut your ends off the ham? And she says, yeah, absolutely. And he says, why do you do that? And she says, because if you don't, it won't fit in the oven. And so if you don't challenge the stuff around you, right, you can just be the person lopping the end off a ham and wasting the ham for 3 generations later, right? Because, ovens used to be small and they're not as small anymore, right? So,
I think good on you to have the awareness to encourage somebody to do that. And I really hope your new hire does do that. Like they should challenge it and say, why do we do things this way? I think that's so important because we become so ingrained in our ways.
Yeah.
And we don't have somebody to spot check us or be like, hey, dude, what do you mean by that? Or why is it that way?
Yeah.
It's so easy to just continue on.
Yeah. You have to raise that self-awareness, in my opinion, regardless of what you do in life, right? Or what kind of business you have. You should look internally and question, is that still the right way to do it? And that's what I like about the professional banter on X, right? Is it keeps me open-minded to a lot of things. And frankly, it's helped me sharpen a lot of my skill set. So, I'm grateful for it. And whether my clients know it or not, they're probably grateful for it too. So
100%. X is great. It's great for that type of stuff. I can't tell you how much stuff I've learned on X, following all these different people that focus on different niches. I know that you're more active in your management style, and I love following you for it. You know what I mean? I learn something from you every time you post, and I hope that other people learn from me, and the back and forth is it's awesome. That's where you want to be. You want that. It's a community.
So cool. Well, again, I appreciate taking the time. And Cliff, if anyone wants to find you and check you out, where can they find your blog, and where can they find you on X?
Yeah. X is Cliff Cornell _ and my blog is readyieldtomaturity.com. I post once a week. Usually try to find some cool nuance, tax topic, something cool on a weekly basis. If anybody wanted me to cover something specifically, feel free to reach out. You should be able to once you're into the newsletter. Love to cover reader topics.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, appreciate it. We'll see you out there.
Awesome. Thanks, Branden.
You bet.